Yeah, thanks for those asking those questions.
Well, yeah, I started. Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about banjo too.
Uh-huh.
If you see any connection with that, because I come from a banjo background,
Uh-huh.
and I bought a shorty. You know what a shorty is? You know, with two strings from Ben Lowe.
No.
Well, it's just a short back and it's just two string.
Uh-huh.
And I played that for quite a while, and now I've got all kinds of things. You can't. It's like a banjo. You can't just have one. So
Right.
I'm looking at the different sounds now, see where it takes me.
Well, yeah, you know what, and I'm not just saying that this because I have a guitar addiction, myself, but I think that each new instrument you get, especially if they have different string combinations, they're each going to teach you something different. They're each going to inspire something different musically, and for example, I played six-string guitar, acoustic and electric, six-string guitar professionally for a decade before I picked up a cigar box guitar for the first time. And I picked it up on stage during a show, and I was immediately lost. Like, what do I do? I'm used to standard tuning. I'm used to six strings. I don't really know how to approach it. And we were just talking with you about that a little while ago. When you pick up a three-string or a four-string, it was like, well, I don't know how to play a four-string, but I do know how to play with broken strings, because that's happened to me plenty of times, when I've bent a string too far, hit something too hard, and I start a song on six, end it on three. And so I was like, okay, well, I just need to change the way I'm thinking about it. I don't need to change anything else, really. And so I tuned it. I ended up tuning it to an open G tuning, just thinking, well, this will sound good, and I pulled out a slide, and I played a song right there when that guy handed me that cigar box guitar, and I played another one, and I didn't want to put it down really, because at the end of the night I was thinking, well, this is giving me all kinds of new ideas. It's making me try a little harder. It's making my hearing, a little bit better. I have to listen to the instrument a little bit more, because I'm not just relying on patterns that I've learned and gotten under my hands. And so I think I went, that day, and the cigar box guitar Roots Instruments was a big part of, me personally going from the part about music where I feel like I'm trying to play this genre correctly, like I'm trying to play blues, or I'm trying to play rock, or I'm trying to play country, or I want to sound like the Allman Brothers when I play this song. There's a pressure in a way when you play conventional six-string guitar to fall into some kind of category like that. And then when you pick up an instrument that there aren't really a whole lot of rules on, it's like no one can really pressure you into playing a certain way the way they can with years and decades and centuries of tradition sometimes telling you have to play it that way. And when you're talking about banjos, though, that's what I think about. Talking about the banjo's been around longer than the guitar, so there's these traditions that are very hard to break with banjo. And like for example, with me, the five-string banjo, I usually take the drone string off and play it as a four-string with an extra tuner. You know what I mean? And just because the drone string from my six-string background is on the wrong side of the instrument, I want that high note to be on the top. And so when I play with the drone string, sure, it makes me learn new things, but I kept it on there for a long time because I felt that pressure of having to be traditional with the instrument. And once I took it off, it became a whole new instrument for me. It felt like it became my banjo at that point, and I could do whatever I wanted on it at that point. And actually, it would sound more like a banjo when I was being myself without the drone string. So I always, I have a philosophy about that kind of tug of war between traditional learning and individual learning, where I think that you should learn traditional ways to play an instrument, because there's a lot of great people who have found out a lot of valuable techniques and songs and cool licks and things like that that will really inform your vocabulary. But once you get something down, try to break the rules a little bit and come up with your own vocabulary. That's really when the magic happens. But if you don't learn those rules to begin with, then a lot of times you just don't have a good framework to build your own style off of.
That's good. A more really fundamental, basic question. If I was tomorrow going to try to recreate an instrument and I was a poor guy, I'd still think I'd be trying to create a six-string guitar. So why are these instruments all mostly two and three-string instruments?
That's a good question. So for those of you who couldn't hear, I guess yeah. What I'm hearing is you saying like when you're thinking, okay, I want to build a, let's say it's a roots instrument, a homemade guitar, a stringed instrument. You're feeling more like I'd rather build a 6-string guitar than a 3-string or a 2-string or a 1-string. Is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah, I'm saying, you know, I've watched guys. I'm poor, and I guess, and I've watched guys play guitar. So I say I'd like to have one of those, and I can't afford one. But I still think my inclination would be to try to build that instrument,
right?
Not this instrument. Why did this happen? That's
Well,
really what I'm asking.
You know, the more I thought, you know, because when I first started playing cigar box guitar, especially, I mainly saw 3 and 4 strings. When I started recording and doing a lot of research, really into the history of cigar box instruments, and for my Smoke and Mirrors album, which, you know, the second disc on that album is all pre-World War II cigar box instruments. Thank you. But I realized that I mean, you can't find a 3-string cigar box guitar that's pre-World War II. I haven't found one, you know, out of all of the designs I've seen, and I'm sure there's some out there, but people were building replicas of conventional instruments back then. If you couldn't get a ukulele, like the ukuleles were huge in the 20s and 30s, much more popular than they are today. So during those decades, you see tons of cigar box ukuleles. In the 1800s, it was almost entirely banjos and fiddles. You hardly saw any other instruments. It's 5-string banjos and 3 or 4-string fiddles, depending on how much time they wanted to put into it, basically, I think. But, you know, you wouldn't see the kind of what's become sort of a conventional cigar box guitar design today. And I think a lot of that has happened in the last 10 or 20 years, more than in the history of cigar box guitar building. 6-string guitars, for example, back then, like on Smoke and Mirrors, with some of the pre-World War II instruments I used were 6 strings, and they'd take a conventional 6-string neck from a broken instrument and somehow attach it to a cigar box or another item that could resonate, and they'd make their own guitar. You know, they were really just trying to play conventional instruments, I think, to a large degree. And they were, you know, a lot of them were really trying to make them look really nice also. You know, they were trying to make them look classy. You know, they really wanted a nice instrument. You know, if you kind of reverse engineer what was this builder thinking back in the 20s or 30s, and you know, like if they look totally black, it means they put beeswax all over it, you know, to make it look shiny, but it turns black after, you know, half a century, things like that. And so, you know, my advice is always do what feels right. You know, I think if you want to build a 6-string, build a 6-string. It's a little more complicated because the more strings you put on it, the more pressure is wanting to make that turn into a mousetrap, you know, and just snap in on itself. So, you know, 3 strings, like the 3-string guitars, it's easy to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or something, get a 1x2, run it through a box, jack the action up, and you have a really affordable, really fun 3-string instrument that you can play, and it only takes sometimes, you know, 20 minutes or an hour to build it, depending on how much you put into it. And there's something really cool and magical about that, you know, going from 0 to having fun playing an instrument in that short amount of time. But, you know, I personally love seeing those instruments, you know, like ones I've just never seen before, you know, like that's a cool idea, or that's something that I've never heard of anyone trying before. And, you know, for example, this instrument right here, I just met Mike, who's, you know, I always end up leaving these festivals with new friends, and he's one of them already. He showed me this instrument, and he said it's a cigar box guitar, and I said, well, that doesn't look like any cigar box guitar that I've seen, you know, is my first impression looking at it. But I start looking at the soundboard here, and it's all pieces of cigar boxes that he made into a mosaic, basically, for the soundboard of this 4-string guitar. The rest is built off of, you know, a lot of, I think, you know, looks like laminates, reused lumber, things like that in this design. Made with you know, great equipment, great craftsmanship. I identified one of these necks, and he told me too, it's a Delta Groove neck, a company I've worked with a long time who build, you know, prefabricated necks basically for cigar box guitars, but other instruments that this will apply to. And, you know, you can pick your headstock, and they're really well made, and you can fret them yourself, or they come fretted. So again, this is what I was thinking when I saw this, but it's like, you know, essentially it's a cigar box guitar, and that's really cool. It's a new design. We started talking, and, you know, a lot of times if there's a nice big box you can make into a guitar, that's great, but you get all these crazy sizes. You know, some are really thin, really, you know, narrow. Some are small. Some just won't work for a guitar or any other instrument. And so he started taking them apart and making soundboards out of those, you know, what would be toss-away boxes. And it's the same concept, you know. It has a lot to do with the way it feels when you play it, the way it looks, which I always think the way it looks affects the way you play it as much as what it's made out of sometimes, because it makes you feel different. And I believe this is the top 4 strings, the highest 4 strings from a 6-string pack. Is that right, Mike? I think it is. And Steve Harvey tuned it to something, so I'm just going to figure it out. I like trying new tunings, so I don't know what you tuned it to, but
D-A-D-D.
D-A-D-D. So it's like a 3-string kind of tuning,
yeah,
but with a double high string. That's interesting.
Right, then we get like the Elmore James type thing on the top. You know,
yeah, that's cool.
Two of the same thing.
And since this is a workshop, I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing right here, and I was just going to make something up to get to know this guitar. But a lot of times I'll play a technique that I always equate with hill country blues. It's like Delta blues is a northern cousin. And what they'll do is, you know, you get a bass line on this low string. It's almost like your bass player down here. You just start a rhythm on that low string with your thumb. And then you get a maybe a rhythm going with the rest of your fingers. And then you play that melody, usually on the top string or the top few strings. But since this top 2 strings are tuned to the same note, I'm going to get a double melody up on that one. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great guitar, Mike. I appreciate you bringing that out too. And again, you know, it feels good. The shape is good, and that's one thing. You know, playing cigar box guitars too, especially when you're just starting out, since the shape is often, you know, very small, rectangular or square. It's a little hard to balance, and this guitar actually has a really nice balance too, and is comfortable on the lap like that.
Talk
Another
a little bit
question?
about the fretted cigar box. You know, the 3 and 4 string. That's